In the winter of 1978, 9 coal miners walked out of a Pennsylvania mine at the end of a night shift and were never seen alive again. No collapse was reported, no explosion, no emergency call. By morning, the mine was operating as if nothing had happened. The camp sat deep in the Appalachian foothills, far from highways and farther from oversight. It was the kind of place where the company owned the houses, whose store, the land, and sometimes the silence. Men worked 12-hour shifts underground, came home black with coal dust, and learned early not to ask questions that didn't put food on the table. The 9 men were not troublemakers, at least not officially. They showed up on time, they worked their sections, they collected their pay. But in the weeks leading up to their disappearance, something had changed. They were seen talking after shifts, standing too close, lowering their voices when supervisors walked by, looking over their shoulders in ways that seasoned miners only do when they know something is wrong. On the nights they vanished, the weather was brutal. Freezing rain turned access roads into glass. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Perfect conditions for an accident if that was what anyone wanted to believe. But the mine logs showed something strange. All 9 men clocked out within the same 2-minute window. That had never happened before. There were no calls to families, no rides requested, no witnesses who could say they saw the men leave together. By sunrise, their lunch pails were still inside the lockers. Their helmets hung on the same hooks they'd used for years. It was as if they had stepped out briefly and never returned. Management told deputies it was likely a group decision. The men must have gone drinking, or hunting, or simply quit and left town. In coal country, explanations didn't need to make sense. They just needed to end the questions. But one deputy noticed something that wouldn't leave him alone. The mine radio logs for that shift were incomplete, and the missing entries lined up exactly with the moment the 9 men clocked out. So the question wasn't where the miners went, it was why someone wanted the moment they left erased. By the second day, the absence could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. 9 families stood at their doors waiting for footsteps that never came. Wives called the mine office and were told the same thing again and again. The men had clocked out. What they did after that was not the company's responsibility. Local deputies searched the roads first. Ditches, creek beds, old logging trails, nothing. No abandoned vehicles, no boot prints in the frozen mud. The rain had washed the ground clean, but not that clean. It was as if the men had been lifted out of the night. Inside the mine, supervisors ordered lockers cleared, lunch pails removed, helmets reassigned. By noon the message was clear. Whatever happened, work was continuing. Men who showed up for the afternoon shift said the air underground felt heavier, quieter. Conversations stopped when foremen passed. Eyes stayed down. One miner admitted later that the 9 had been asking questions about ventilation failures and missing safety reports. Nothing formal, just talk. But talk travels fast in a place where walls are thin and loyalties are measured by survival. Someone above them had noticed. The sheriff requested access to company radio records. He received copies already summarized. When he asked for the originals, he was told they had been routinely reused, a standard practice, according to management. An unfortunate coincidence, according to everyone else. By the 3rd night, rumors filled the camp. Some said the men were taken to another site. Some said they were warned and ran. Others said nothing at all, afraid that saying the wrong thing would make the number 9 become 10. Then, A trucker came forward quietly. He claimed he'd been stopped on a service road the night the miners vanished. Told to turn round, told the road was closed. He didn't recognize the men who stopped him, but he recognized their authority. They spoke like people who didn't expect to be questioned. The company denied everything. The state hesitated. Federal inspectors were notified, then delayed. In the gap between those delays, something irreversible happened. Evidence aged. Memories softened. Fear settled in. And beneath all of it sat the question no one dared to ask out loud. If the 9 miners didn't disappear by accident, who had the power to make them disappear so completely? The first body was found 5 days later, nearly 20 miles from the mine. A hunter spotted it at the edge of a frozen ravine, half covered by snow and pine needles. The man was identified by his boots. Company issued. Initial reports claimed exposure, but the marks on his wrists told a different story. By nightfall, 2 more bodies were located in separate wooded areas, miles apart. No personal items, no wallets, no watches. Just men placed carefully, as if distance itself was part of the plan. The coroner noted blunt force trauma before death. Hypothermia finished what someone else had started, and the company responded fast. A statement was released before autopsies were completed. Tragic misadventure, it read. Unsafe off-site activity. The implication was clear. The men were reckless. Their deaths were their own fault. Families were warned not to speak to reporters. Some were offered temporary assistance. Others were reminded their housing was tied to employment. In mining towns, support and silence often arrive together. Investigators noticed something else. Every location where a body was found sat just outside county jurisdiction lines. Different deputies, different paperwork, different delays. No single agency ever had the full picture at once. A state inspector privately admitted the case felt managed, not erased, guided. Just enough information released to keep outrage contained, just enough confusion to prevent focus. By the end of the week, 6 bodies had been recovered. 3 were never found. The official cause of death became environmental exposure following voluntary departure from work site. No mention of restraint, no mention of trauma, no mention of coordination. And yet, one detail couldn't be explained away. All 9 men had signed the same safety complaint 2 days before they vanished. It was never filed. Someone had intercepted it, someone had read it, and someone had decided it would never be submitted again. Once the bodies began appearing, the pace of the investigation slowed instead of accelerating. Jurisdictional disputes surfaced overnight. County deputies deferred to the state. The state deferred to federal agencies. Federal agencies cited a lack of clear interstate crime. Each step added distance between responsibility and action. Behind the scenes, company lawyers moved faster than law enforcement. Families received visits, not from detectives, but from representatives offering assistance packages. Funeral costs covered. Temporary housing extensions. Small trust funds for children. Every offer came with language that discouraged speculation and public statements. One widow refused. She told a reporter her husband had warned her. "If anything happens to me," he'd said, "it won't be an accident." The interview never aired. The station claimed technical issues. The footage was erased within a week. A former mine supervisor later admitted that a meeting had taken place the afternoon before the men vanished. not documented, not scheduled. Attendance limited to upper management and security contractors. The topic, he was told, was containment. Containment of information. Containment of disruption. No written orders were found because none were given. In coal country, instructions travel as expectations. Everyone involved understood what needed to happen without anyone having to say it directly. When federal inspectors finally arrived, the mine had already been cleaned, equipment moved, radios replaced, logs updated. They interviewed workers, who answered carefully, eyes fixed on the floor, knowing that honesty had consequences far beyond the courtroom. By spring, the case was officially closed. Cause of death remained unchanged. No suspects named, no indictments filed. The 3 missing bodies were quietly reclassified as presumed deceased. Paperwork replaced people. The mine expanded operations that summer, and the question that remained wasn't who committed the crime, but how many people had agreed not to see it. Years passed, and the mine remained open long enough for memories to dull and faces to blur. New workers arrived who had never heard the 9 names. Old workers learned not to speak them. The road where the first body was found slowly disappeared under brush and snow, as if the land itself was trying to forget. In 1991, a retired security contractor gave a brief statement to a labor researcher. Off the record, he claimed the miners had been intercepted after their shift and transported for questioning. He wouldn't say by whom, he wouldn't say where. Only that they were never meant to come back. The interview notes vanished before publication. No official apology was ever issued. No inquiry reopened the case. The mine finally shut down in 2002, citing declining profitability. Equipment was sold, buildings demolished, the camp emptied. Silence outlived everyone involved. Families moved away. Children grew up knowing their fathers had died at work without ever being told how. 3 bodies were never recovered, leaving funerals without remains, grief without closure. In legal terms, the case was finished. In human terms, it never was. What happened in Pennsylvania in 1978 wasn't just a crime. It was a lesson in power. In places where survival depends on obedience, truth becomes negotiable, justice becomes optional, and silence becomes policy. The 9 miners didn't disappear because they were careless. They disappeared because they believed that speaking together made them safer. Someone proved them wrong, and that is why no one was ever charged, because the question was never who pulled the trigger. It was who decided the men could be erased. If this story made you question how far power can reach in forgotten places, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Some truths aren't hidden by accident, they're buried by design.